Today we are interviewing Rhea Ballard-Thrower, who is the director of the Howard University School of Law Library and Associate Professor of Law. Prior to coming to Howard in 2001, Rhea worked as a librarian at the law libraries of Georgia State University and the University of Texas. Rhea, let's begin with a little personal history. Can you tell us about where you were raised and about your life both when you were young and today?
Yeah, I am a Midwestern baby. I was born and raised in Toledo, Ohio, and so that I say I'm very Midwestern in my heart, even though I live in the Mid-Atlantic now, and so I primarily did all of my education in Ohio, and then somewhere I went to the University of Cincinnati for undergrad, and I went to law school at the University of Kentucky, and then I went to library school at the University of Michigan. So I stayed pretty much in that area. I guess technically, you know, UK is the South, so, but still very much. It's just right over the water from Cincinnati, which is literally why I went there, because it was literally right over the bridge. But other than that, my parents still live in Ohio. I still, in my heart, I still very much have Midwestern values and stuff. But I love the Mid-Atlantic. I love big cities. And so I very much enjoy being here. I am married. My husband, Lawrence, is an attorney, and for the Maryland Attorney General in the Water Division. He has a very long title, you know, but basically he works in the environment area for water. And I have a son, Grayson, who is a 9-year-old, and he's in 4th grade.
Well, that all sounds wonderful. Big cities, you certainly are in one of the, well, it doesn't seem sometimes like a big city. I had a trip here a while back, and one of my sisters from the West Coast was here, and she kept commenting on the fact where all the tall buildings. And of course we know that in the district you do not have tall buildings.
No.
You have to go to the suburbs to see those.
Exactly.
Yes. Could you tell us a little bit about your education and your professional training? For example, what degrees do you hold, and where did you go to college, and then to law and finally library school?
Okay, sure. I got my bachelor's at the University of Cincinnati and my law degree at the University of Kentucky, and then my library school degree at the University of Michigan. And so what happened is that when I was at the University of Michigan, Virginia Wise was one of my library school professors, and she actually recommended that I interview for a job at the University of Texas. So that's actually how I ended up at my first position, which was at the law library at the University of Texas.
Well, it's interesting. The University of Texas, of course, you probably got to know one of actually the principal mentors of our generation, Roy Mirsky. So that sort of leads me to ask, thinking of Roy perhaps had a role in this, how did you decide to become a law librarian, and perhaps did someone play a role or in that decision and how you came to it, or did you come to it through some other means? No,
I actually was encouraged to become a law librarian. In fact, when I was at the University of Kentucky, the director there was Bill James. And so I actually was a student assistant who worked at the circulation desk, and he actually noticed that I really liked seeing around the reference librarians and seeing what they were doing, and I worked the evening hours so that, you know, when the librarians weren't there, and the weekends, and so I really liked helping the students with their research questions. And at that time, as you can imagine, Lexis and Westlaw were still considered somewhat new. And so I really liked working on this, you know, Lexis and Westlaw and helping the other students, because we had limited hours in which we could use it. It is so different from today, where it's, you know, 24/7 and everybody gets their own ID. I remember our school literally had one password, and we all shared one password, and so you had to sign up for maybe your 1 hour a semester, you know. So, but if you worked in the law library, you got to use them more. So, and it was actually Bill James who noticed that I had an interest in it, and he actually came to me, like, I guess the second year I was in law school, and asked had I considered being a law librarian, to which of course I said, what is that? I really did. And I'm like, I know you all do something, but I'm not quite too sure what that is, to which he laughed. And then of course he explained, and then told me I would have to go to at least one more year of school, or, you know, possibly 1.5, 2 more years of school. And I'm like, oh no, you know. But by the time of my 3rd year, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I tell people, I graduated from law school in May. In and by August, I was already packed up and in Ann Arbor at the library school program. So I never had an interest in practicing or anything. I always knew I wanted to be a law librarian. So I got to thank Bill James for that.
So it was Westlaw and Lexis, and access to it that helped with the trick.
That's what did it.
I hate to admit this, but in my day and age, it was photocopies.
Really?
If you worked in the library, since they always sort of had the concession, you could make all you wanted.
Right. See, there you go.
Whereas the regular faculty might have a little limit, such as we had at American the first year or two I was there. It was, I think, 150 a semester.
Isn't that wild?
And you know, I had the concession as director of the library, so I made them all everything I wanted. It was just fine.
There you go.
Dean didn't know.
That's great. Oh, that's wonderful.
Oh, why don't we move on now, Rhea, to your career in law librarianship? Could you tell us a little bit about some of the things you have done at Howard, and perhaps some of the things that you did earlier in your career, some of the places you worked and the experiences and opportunities that those afforded to you?
Okay. My first position was at the University of Texas Taunton Law Library, which of course means I'm one of the many, what we call the Mirsky babies. And as I had mentioned, Virginia Wise actually recommended that I interview there. And one of the reasons why I actually did the interview, I'm going to be honest about this, I interviewed for like 3 positions, and not at the university, but 3 different academic libraries. And the reason why I actually interviewed at the University of Texas is because when I called Bill James and some of the other directors that I knew, you know, Margaret Leary at the University of Michigan, I either got, "Don't go there, you must be insane," or, "Oh my God, it'll be the best job you ever have." There was no middle of the road, and I did not know him other than I kind of heard of him, and his name was on the textbook because we used his textbook in our advanced legal research class. So, you know, I had this big, you know, oh my gosh, this Roy Mirsky guy, and I still remember that I interviewed with him in Detroit because the ABA annual meeting was there, and he met me at the restaurant at the convention. I guess it was probably at a hotel then. They weren't doing convention centers back then. And I still remember to this day, I have never told him this, but, you know, so I'm standing there and I'm waiting on him and up he comes up the escalator, and no one ever told me that he was short in stature. I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned because, you know, he had the book and he had all these articles, and then people either loved him or hated him. And so in my mind, I had pictured this 6'5" guy with, you know, and it was really, really funny. And then I still remember the first question, and we sat down, and the first interview question he asked me was, "What was the latest non-legal book you've read? Why did you pick it? And tell me what you thought about it." I was stunned. I had all these library questions, management, why I want to be a reference librarian, why I want to work at the University of Texas. And of course, at that time, I did not know that he loved to read like those crazy romance novels on the beach in the summer. This is one of the things that he loved to do. And he had all these, and I mean, you wouldn't think, but he loved to read that kind of stuff. Literally what we call like trash novels, but he loved reading that kind of stuff. So he really did have an interest in what did I read that really wasn't legal. So after that interview, he literally offered me the job on the spot. I remember that. And I said to him, there's absolutely no way I can accept a position where I have never even seen the building, have never even met the people there. They don't even know if they like me. And so he's like, "Okay, well, I guess I'll have to bring you to Austin so at least you can see it." That's literally how my career started at the University of Texas. I happen to be one of those people that he was a mentor for me till the day he died. We got along fantastic. I'm definitely going to be in that side where, you know, he was very honest with me. He told me he would work me to death for 2 years, barely pay me any money, but it would be the best experience I ever had in law librarianship. And he was true. He was right. He was right. You know, and I tell people I have not regretted it one bit about going there. We end up being really, really good friends. You know, and I said, and he had looked out for me for the whole time while he was alive. And I'm still thankful to Virginia Wise for recommending that I go there. And even when the people said, "Don't do it," she said, "Do it." And I have to thank her for that too. So I worked for him for 2 years. And one of the reasons why I left the University of Texas to go to Georgia State was because I was junior reference librarian, I wasn't really involved in teaching. And I realized when I was at the law school, I really, really wanted to teach. So I was actually very selective as to where I wanted to go from there. And the reason why I picked Georgia State was because of Nancy Johnson. Because Nancy Johnson had written an exercise book that went to the textbook that people were using in legal bibliography. And she had such a great reputation in regards to being a teacher. And she really let her librarians teach in the classroom. She was one of the first ones that I knew where legal research was a full credit class. They had an exam. The librarians got to teach it. They got free reign. Everybody had their own section. I was very, very impressed that because she had identified how important it was for the librarians to be involved in teaching legal research rather than, let's say, the writing instructors. So I left the University of Texas and went to Georgia State. And to be honest with you, Mirsky was not that thrilled because Georgia State had just gotten accredited. They were a brand new baby law school then, and they had just gotten out of the 7-year cycle. And so, and he was really not thrilled. And he was like, he literally said to me, Nancy Johnson's great and all, but, you know, the school may not be here tomorrow. You don't need anything about that law school. I still remember that. I was like, I'm still going. And so, and I ended up staying there for almost 10 years. I loved Georgia State. I liked it. It was the only school that had the part-time evening program for the students. And so the student body was very different from the University of Texas. We had a lot of older students, students with families, students who were doing, this was their second career choice. They were very serious about their education. And so you had that good mix of the day students who were right out of undergrad, but in the evening, the whole feel of the law school would change because you were getting these students who were literally leaving their jobs at Coca-Cola to come here at night to take law classes so that they can eventually do this career change. And so that's when the students there were so fantastic. And that's one of the reasons why I think I stayed there so long, because I enjoyed the students. And Atlanta is a very nice place to live too. And then after that, I decided, after having various positions of management within Georgia State, I realized, and I used to joke with Nancy, unless she was going to get hit by a bus, she wasn't going anywhere. So if I ever wanted to be a director, and we would laugh about that, and she'd say, I better watch my back, you know, that I would eventually have to go, because I knew she was not leaving Atlanta. In fact, she's retiring this year. In fact, she called me and said, you can apply for my job now. It was really funny. And I said, I like D.C. I'm staying in D.C. But anyway, so after that, that's when I interviewed for the job at Howard. The funny thing is that Howard was always one of the dream schools of where I wanted to work, because it was Howard. I have a lot of family that have gone to Howard, neighbors that have gone to Howard, so Howard is a very strong part of my personal environment. And so I was very familiar with how I had gone to Howard undergrad, you know, they had nothing to do, you know, hanging out and partying. But that's another story, you know, I mean, not Howard undergrad, but Howard homecoming, which is a very, very big event. And so you know, so going to Howard was a very good choice for me, because it's something I wanted to do. And I have been absolutely thrilled about that. Is that the social justice mission of the school is the reason why now I've been here almost 11 years, because the students are just phenomenal. The school truly believes that we are supposed to develop and educate lawyers so they can make the world a better place, so they can, you know, make a stake and do something to make the world that we live in better for especially marginalized communities. And so that's what just makes, you know, being there such a great place to be. So that's where I am now.
Well, I'll tell one story, sort of to compliment what you just said about Howard. I happened to be on the search committee when you were hired. Yes. The dean was somebody I knew, and he asked me if I would you know, work with him a little bit on that, and I was flattered and honored to do it, frankly. And so we interviewed you, and we were so nervous that you wouldn't accept the offer. We were dying to, you know, get you there. And you know, you had a brand new building. You had a tremendous opportunity. You came in the middle of the move.
I know.
Took it over beautifully, as you know, one would certainly hope. But I don't think you'd ever moved to Library before,
no,
had you?
I had not. No, I had not.
It was an interesting introduction to that aspect of our occasional work.
Exactly.
But we were so pleased to get you, and then of course to have you come here to DC, because you and I knew each other from the association. And,
already.
I guess that's true. Everybody knows everybody
right.
pretty much, I think,
Exactly.
from the association, it seems.
Right.
So it was delightful to have you here in Washington with us. And as you say, it sounds like it's worked out well for you.
Yes, it has.
Yeah. I'm not surprised, though, that Roy wasn't as keen on your taking the Georgia State job, because, you know, Roy has a reputation with his proteges.
Yes, I know.
Of basically placing them
Of where
himself.
they go. Exactly, yes.
And he probably had some place picked out for you,
me.
and then you came up with your own
ideas. Like, what? Yeah, exactly.
Well, being a good mentor, he basically finally caved in and encouraged it.
There you go. There you go. Yes,
Yeah.
he did. Yeah.
And yes, as you say, Nancy is still there, but won't be for long.
I know.
I've had the pleasure of interviewing her for this
really?
project just the other day.
Great.
Part of this trip. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it was good. Well, why don't we focus now on some of the things you've done for the profession?
Okay.
Basically, perhaps also in the places you've worked. You've already talked about teaching at Georgia State, and probably some of the stuff you have done at Howard you might want to mention. But you've done a lot of things for the Association of American Law Schools, the Southeastern chapter of the American Association of Law Libraries, and the Consortium of Southeastern Law Libraries. And of course, more recently, the local chapter here in D.C. of the Law Librarian Society of Washington, D.C. I even noted in your background that you were active in the Atlanta Law Libraries Association when you were at Georgia State. So your list of contributions to each of these, and perhaps to other aspects of the profession, is certainly long and distinguished. You know, I'd like, if you could, perhaps, could you talk a little bit about some of these aspects of your work and some of the things you've been able to be involved in, and perhaps achievements or particularly things you're particularly proud of from sort of the outreach beyond just in your own office at the law school.
Okay. You know, I think I have to, once again, I have to give a lot of credit to Roy. He very much believed that his law librarians were much more than just that we provided services or assisted the faculty at the University of Texas. And he very much wanted us to have an imprint on a larger scale and, you know, in regards to the associations. So starting there as a new librarian and being taught that literally it was your responsibility to actually do more than just your day-to-day job. And I'll give you an example. For example, he would not pay for us to go to AALL annual meetings unless we were doing something. We either had, and it could be even as simple as you were working at the registration desk, you were, you know, you volunteered. It didn't, you know, especially as a new librarian saying, oh, I'm doing a program. You know, it wasn't even anything like that. But that was one of the reasons why we laughed at when we would go to these, you know, the national meetings. It's like the Texas people were like everywhere. And I'm not too sure it's because they didn't realize that if we didn't, he wouldn't pay. So it was kind of like a motivation. But in the process of him encouraging it that way, you got to eventually get on committees and then work with other law librarians and then expand your network so that when you had questions about things, I could say, oh, I actually know someone at the University of Oklahoma. Let me call them and see if they can answer my oil and gas question or something like that. And so I think in his way of encouraging us, where without the financial support, you can't do anything, but by doing that, it actually got you initially motivated to do it. And then once you realized how much fun it was, and being involved in helping out the association and creating an image of law librarians that we felt would be positive and, you know, very supportive of each other, then he could just let us go, because by that time we were all like, I'm on this committee, what are you doing? Oh, I'm helping out here. And then by that time it didn't matter. So so I literally took that same, I guess, concept with me when I went to Georgia State, and Nancy was extremely supportive of her librarians, and she didn't have that role that she wouldn't pay unless you did something. So we all could go anyway, but you know, since I had kind of started and been on committees and all those kinds of things, I had kind of already started that down that path. So that's the reason why it actually worked out well, And I guess in that way I have to credit. That's why I said I have to credit Roy for that, because I think he really had a good perspective on that. That it was very important for us to participate in the association, because the association is us. And if we don't do it, then what happens to the association? If we don't, give a little bit of our extra time to, do the programming, to serve on committees, and to, decide who can get scholarship money, and, because I was on the scholarship committee, and I actually received the scholarship my first year, so that was a way for me to eventually, years later, help other people get the scholarship so that they could go to school, and become a law librarian or something. So I think that was a really good idea.
Speaking of scholarships, I chaired that committee one year for the association, and in the process gave out the various scholarships. The committee actually ranked the applicants, and I just sort of went down the list. Was able to get enough money though that year, so we gave everybody a scholarship, and that was the easiest time to be a chair.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, and a few weeks ago I was interviewing Carol Nicholson, one of our colleagues, and in the course of the interview she mentioned that she had gotten a scholarship when she first.
Wow.
And I thought that she was one of the people I gave it to.
Oh, wow.
Well, the committee ranked, and I gave it to her. I did my my duty, but I was so pleased. And, she worked up to executive board president.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have a suspicion that you're on that track too at some point.
Thank you.
You've done well. You were one of my, what was it, mentees we called it, at one meeting. And
that's right.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a good program.
I did. I thought that was an excellent program too.
Yeah. Well, another aspect of people like Nancy and Roy, they are prolific authors and have thought very highly of the need for librarians to write a bit, and you've done a fair amount of that. In various publications, the Law Library Journal, the Legal Reference Services Quarterly, the Georgian Librarian, and others. Could you talk a little bit about these, and perhaps share any views you have about whether our colleagues, at least in the academic end of law librarianship, whether it's a good thing to have them write, and some of the advantages to them of doing so?
Yes. I actually had an interest in writing, I have to say, actually in undergrad. When I was at the University of Cincinnati, I took a Black literature class, or literature that focused on African American authors and writers, and so one of the reasons why I took that class, and I just love that class, and I don't remember which author is credited for saying this statement. I remember if it was Toni Morrison or James Baldwin or which one, but and basically the concept was, if you don't write your own story, then others will write what they think is your story. And I have always remembered that. And so that's one of the reasons why they said that I forgot the Black author who's credited for saying that, initially got into writing, because they wanted to say, this is who I am, this is what our culture is about, and not what you may think about it, but because I live it, I want to write about it. And so that was the thing for me about law librarianship. I remember Roy actually said he recommended that you pick an area and you focus on it and you write on that, and then you can become an expert on that area, and then people will, want you for programming to speak and that kind of thing. But the problem is, I like so many different aspects of law librarianship that I didn't do that option. I wrote about all the stuff I liked about. So, so I would write articles about teaching. I'd write articles about what it was like to be a mentor. I write articles, So that's why if you look at my scholarship, it's kind of all over the place. And a lot of it is because I chose to write about things that I felt were important to me, and I wanted that story to come across so that other people could either learn from what the experiences I had, or just thoughts that I said maybe as an association or a profession we could do, one go in this direction or go in another. I think my favorite probably publications that I've written is One I wrote with Joe Morris, who was another law librarian at Georgia State at that time, and we tease him. He went on to the dark side, meaning he went to a law firm. I'm joking, but that's a
I think they refer to the academic side as
the dark side. Exactly. So he went on to a law firm, but and it was the article literally was a play. We wrote a murder mystery, and it was called Legal Research Can Be Murder. And it was for, I'm going to say, the Georgia Librarians Association. So it wasn't even written for law librarians. It was written for non-law librarians in a funny way, because I was convinced that teaching legal research did not have to be boring. Because I went through that generation of, you stand up with the book, and this is the digest, and it has so many topics, and use a descriptive word index. And I can remember as a student going, oh my gosh, kill me dead. And so I kept saying, there's got to be a better way to do this. And the great thing about having the ability to teach and have your own classroom, and that I had at Georgia State, because Nancy literally gave us free reign, that I was able to do these things. And so we would have student presentations, and my students were really creative, and they would come up with these great creative ways to actually present a topic. And then that's when Joe and I got this idea to write a murder mystery. So what happened was, it literally went on the road. I mean, for I'd say almost up to 5 years, library associations would call us and ask us permission if they could do it. It was actually presented at AALL, I think SLA, and then I think 15 years ago, somebody else, another association, I don't know, they must have done a bibliography search, they found it, they called me and said, we want to totally revamp it, and they rewrote it, and they just credited us for it. So it even got, now it's even in a new phase. I guess it's version 2 now, and I don't know if someone else is using it from that, but it was a lot of fun. And I think out of all the publications I've written, it's not scholarly. I think it had, I'm sure it had no value for my tenure packet, but personally, I think that was one of my favorite things that I've written about. The other one that I think is probably the most meaningful publication for me was the publication that 4 other minority law librarians that we did on minority law librarians in the association, because that had never been done before, where we actually went out and surveyed and interviewed law librarians and find, things such as, where did you go to school? Did you have a mentor? Did you already have an interest in librarianship? Did you have a career before you became a law librarian? Do you have a law degree? Do you not have a law degree? What do you do now? All those things that you're probably learning when you're doing these interviews, right? And so we, that even today, a lot of people, I have seen that in other people's footnotes when they've done research on the association in regards to minorities and law librarianship. So that's an article that I wrote with Helena Lay, Dwight King, and Grace Mills, and that's one of the ones I probably think that I'm the proudest of, because I think it was very meaningful to me as a minority law librarian.
That was actually a very good article. One of the advantages is I did, even when I was active, get to read a few things in the journal, and now that I'm retired, I'm able to look at virtually anything in it and do so. And I find a lot of the writing very interesting. Even the things that are on topics that I think I know a lot about. I sit there and I learn other takes on things, and it's really good. But the important thing is the people that are going to the effort to do it, I think. You also mentioned the murder mystery you wrote. You're not our only colleague that's done something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ed Bander, who has been retired for years from Suffolk, I think, up in Boston area. He wrote a book a few years back called The Hidden History of the Essex Law School, I believe is the title. And I read it about 2 years ago, and there's a murder in that. But it is a fun read, especially for people in our field, because it talks about a lot of the people in law librarianship, and you can spot them as you read the thing. And for example, Roy Mirsky is in there. He isn't identified directly as Roy, but you can tell what this character is all about. It's old Roy.
Oh my God!
And there are others you would recognize. You would enjoy that book.
I'm gonna have to get that.
Yeah, it's available on the Kindle, because that's how I read mine.
There you go.
Well, I want to thank you, Rhea Ballard-Thrower, for allowing us to visit with you this morning. and for taking a few moments to share so much about yourself and about our profession. Before closing, however, this is the last word.
Okay.
Is there anything you would like to conclude as we conclude the interview?
Yeah. You know, if I were going to say one thing to end, it would be that I consider myself very fortunate. Because I know, especially when I've read, and I read like the Harvard Business Review and things like that, and that there are a lot of people in this world who go to jobs that they don't like. And they do that because financially it pays them well, and you know, you have bills to pay and the economics, but they really, really don't want to do what they do for a living. And I have read that there are more heart attacks on Mondays than any other day out of the week, because people are literally getting up in the morning and going to do something that they really don't want to do. And I am one of those fortunate people that I love what I do. You know, I literally say, I think, you know, sometimes I believe that God guided me to it. That's going back to my Midwestern values here. You know, or I fell into it because I end up going to Michigan to meet Virginia Wise, who led me to Roy Mursky, who led me to Nancy Johnson, you know, and then eventually I ended up at Howard. You know, it's literally a dream come job that I love. I like my colleagues. I think our profession is just amazing in what we do. I have been in it in this transitory, what is the word for that? I guess transitional period where, you know, we've gone from the print to now the digital, which to me actually makes it exciting. You know, so it's never a dull moment in what we do for a living. I can't even imagine by the time I retire what they're going to be doing, you know, how they're going to be doing research in law libraries. It'd be something off of Star Trek where you just say computer, you know, and it just tells you what you need. I have no idea, but it is such fun, enjoyable, and, you know, rewarding profession. And I am so glad that I'm a part of it. Yeah.
Well, with these computers and the memory increasing all the time, the capability going right with it, let's hope it's the Star Trek computer here you just mentioned, instead of the one from a 20,001 A Space Odyssey.
No, Hal. Yeah.
Old Hal sort of took command. I tried to.
Exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, I think perhaps on that note, I want to thank you again for being part of this morning, and thank you for Rhea. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Good.